Hi, good morning everyone. It is Friday the 19th of February and today I'm delighted to be in Coventry, not in Gateshead this morning, in Coventry, where I've been joined by Elisabeth Ring, the subject leader from OCR for Business and Economics. And we've just had a nice little session this morning, haven't we, Elisabeth, with regard to some filming for the OCR website, yes, which I look forward to seeing. So one of the things that we're talking about this morning has been how the essay responses or the extended writing responses in the new specification are going to be assessed horizontally rather than, as it was before, vertically. Could you just tell us a little bit about that change?
Well, we find it's a bit fairer the way it's now being assessed, because the examiner now looks at the whole answer holistically and determines what level that answer will be. So is it a level 1, 2 or 3, or if it's a longer question, a level 4? And then within each level, they look in more detail of how the assessment objectives, knowledge, understanding, analysis and evaluation, are how good they are met.
Okay, and we were talking in this morning, you gave me an example of a response which was level 3 good, and it was judged to be level 3 holistically, and it would get top mark band if it was good in evaluation, analysis and the knowledge section. If that was all good, they would get top mark for that. So what if it was only good in one of those areas and reasonable in the other two?
Well, in that example, the range was between 11 and 15 marks. So if, for example, the evaluation wasn't good but only reasonable, you wouldn't get, obviously, the 15 marks, but anything between 11 and 14, depending on how well you've covered the analysis or how good your diagrams were, for example.
Okay, right. And my students have been working quite a lot lately practicing essay responses. Mm-hmm. And could you give them any good advice and guidance as to how they might best approach the essay response in the June exams?
Well, I always say it's not the quantity, it's the quality. So we don't expect pages and pages of words. It's really be neat, be concise, don't say anything superfluous. Make sure you really answer the question, and the obvious bit is the analysis, where you can really get marks or lose marks. So make sure you have a neat analysis, meaning every little step of that reasoning chain, make sure you say it. If you've got diagrams, label them correctly and really talk about your diagrams. Talk about what they represent, what they show. If there's a movement in one of the curves, talk about it. Don't just throw them there and think, well, they speak for themselves. They don't.
Yes.
So that's the main advice. Make sure you've got a really nice and neat analysis with the correctly labelled diagrams. And then when it comes to the evaluation, it's this making sure you've got this two-sided argument. This it depends what economics is all about.
And is it the case that in the evaluation, do they have to sort of do on the one hand and then explain, on the other hand explain, and then come to an overall reasoned conclusion to finish?
Yeah, it depends a little bit on the question, what the question is asking for. So in the evaluation, you really have to go back to what the original question has asked you to do. If it asks for a two-sided approach, that is what you would do.
But so read the question carefully, because that's not always the case.
Yeah. So it might be that you have not two sides of an argument, but you say this is a good solution for example, market failure, but it depends on all those factors if it really works.
Okay. And would it be the case that you would always expect to see diagrams in the essay response?
No, they explicitly tell you in the question whether we expect them to get the full marks, but even if it doesn't ask you explicitly to use diagrams, if you feel it helps your analysis, I would always recommend use the diagrams.
Okay. And we were talking earlier, it's a 60-mark paper, 90 minutes. How long would you advise candidates to sort of spend on the essay question at the end?
Anything between 20-25 minutes.
Right, okay. Excellent. What about then if candidates want to practice for the summer exams? Obviously we've got the multiple choice section, the data question, and then the essay. I always think that the multiple choice questions, people think multiple choice are easy, but actually they're very difficult. Where would you advise us to look for practice papers?
Well, at the moment we are producing practice multiple choice question, but until we've got this resource available for teachers, I always recommend our Cambridge International examinations, because they've they're really experienced with producing and also evaluating multiple choice questions, how well they really assess what you want to assess. So they're experts with multiple choice questions, and I always recommend looking at their website for economics and just go through their practice or past papers.
Okay, and one thing I meant to ask, just coming back to the essay questions, I get my students to do some reading every week from the Sunday Times.
Yeah, I know you do.
They all subscribe to the Economist magazine. I try to encourage them to put something of that knowledge into a conclusion in an essay, if possible. Would you recommend that?
It's definitely, that will differentiate between an A and an A star and the very top marks if you're able to draw on that extra knowledge of further reading in your evaluation. Yes.
Okay, great. So it is actually worth doing, everybody. Okay, and just one final thing then. Could you maybe just say a little bit about how the directive words, as I call them, or the command words, how has that all changed?
Well, we felt it's important that we streamlined the set of command words. So you will only find basically the evaluate and the explain and maybe draw and calculate in the exam and also in the specification. And the main point to bear in mind is if it says evaluate in the specification, this assumes all the lower level command words up to that level. So if we say you should be able to evaluate that topic, that assumes obviously you've got sound knowledge and understanding, you're able to apply that knowledge, you're able to analyse all the processes in place, and then you're able to evaluate it. So that's the highest order skill. That assumes you have all the other skills as well.
Okay. And then just lastly, you may not remember, but when you came to school in September 2015, one of the things that we're trying to do is to increase the proportion of students getting the A stars. Is there anything that really differentiates the A, the good A, from the A star paper?
Well, as you mentioned before, it's this extra bit of further reading, but it's also making sure that students do what we expect them to do. So they don't wander off a tangent, but really make sure it's a neat answer, showing they have sound knowledge, having this very good and detailed analysis, not leaving out any step in between, saying the obvious, making sure that's a neat analysis, and then having an evaluation which draws on that analysis and comes to a judgment which is supported.
Right, okay. Right, well that's great. Elisabeth, thank you very much for allowing me to do this little interview today. Thanks for inviting me down to Coventry today. It's the first time I've been here, and look forward to maybe doing further recordings in the future.
Yes, well thank you Gavin for coming.
Thanks.